7:32. Welcome. I wanted to take you through a couple of things today. Firstly, I wanted to have a little discussion with you about getting back to regular meetings. And then also, because we've focused the last few meetings on a lot of technical stuff, I thought it might be nice just to start thinking about the creative stuff again and taking photos creatively rather than all the post-production and technical stuff. So we'll touch a little bit on that again today, but only just touch on it. I really want to focus more on the doing stuff in camera if you can. So firstly, let's talk about regular meetings. The committee had a chat the other day and came up with a proposal, and I just wanted to bounce it off you guys. So we are going to try and restart face-to-face meetings on the 9th of September, which is the second Wednesday of the month. So we go back to the 2 meetings a month with speakers, the second and the last Wednesday of the month. So the 9th is the second Wednesday, so that is our first opportunity in September. We talked through what we might have to do. Obviously, until we know what the government restrictions are at that time, we can't be exact, but assuming that some kind of restrictions are still going to be in place, we're going to assume that we're going to have to sit far apart from each other, probably not have tables, just go theatre style with the seating so that we can have the distancing. Maybe a one-way system with the doors, so maybe come in the fire door, go out the other door, so that you're not passing too close to each other in the corridors. With the bar, hopefully we could have the bar in the meeting room rather than have to go out through the corridors into the other bar. But these are all subject to discussions, what the government restrictions are at the time, and also what the football club is prepared to do. And we've not been able to reach them yet, so we don't know for sure.
Sorry, they were talking about reopening for social events and different bits and pieces on the football club the other day. So
okay.
I think they're thinking about opening up as well, yeah.
Great. Did you get a date out of them?
No, there was no dates on it. It was just an email that comes through from the football club.
Yeah, the latest thing on the bowls clubs, Ray, is they can start to look at opening up their facilities. Obviously subject to risk assessments, etc. So things are moving along with the clubs, social clubs.
Good. Well, I guess, you know, that all bodes well. And the other thing we thought that would make sense for a number of reasons is that we continue with the online project vote as we have been up till now, that we will continue that primarily for 2 reasons. One, it means that the whole thing is a lot more efficient. We can get all the voting, the counting and the winners organised before the meeting. And that means that, you know, Sue and others who run around like silly buggers on the night trying to get all that done while the meeting's taking place, they're not actually enjoying the meeting because they're too busy organising. If we carry on with the online vote process that we're currently using, then those people can actually sit down and enjoy the meeting because it'll all be done and dusted by the time we sit down and have our meeting. And then the other reason is that having all the prints in one place means that you've got to all squeeze into that one space, and that, you know, could break the social distancing rules that are imposed on us. So we're thinking that we're going to continue with the online voting for those reasons, subject to everything we've said. But the big question, I guess, really is would you attend? I can understand some of you might be reluctant to do that, and I perfectly understand that. But if too many of you are feeling that way, well, then there's no point in us doing that. because
Right.
obviously
If you
we
look
would.
in the chat, right,
Yes?
if you look in the chat, you'll see how many people have answered you.
And what's the answer?
5 people said they would come.
Okay. Well, I'd like all of you.
Surely the biggest issue is that the government isn't letting groups meet. I know they're opening pubs and they're opening various places, but you go with your family and you don't go in a group. Groups are going to be the last thing to be let out, in inverted commas, especially if we have more of Leicester's trouble. So, well, it's a lovely plan. I think you might find you're a bit early.
Right,
With September.
right,
Just a comment.
right.
Yes.
As I said earlier, bowls clubs now are able to open their facilities and bar facilities. And I know Tylehurst are looking at ways that they can do this. So, you know, we are looking at September, so being positive. Most of the bowls clubs are open by the middle of this month with their bars.
But is it fair to say that that would be for bowls meeting out in the open air and not in the enclosed?
No, that's indoors. They can
Okay.
open their indoor facilities.
Okay.
So
Well,
Not for a group meeting, that's for people to come along. The same way as if you were going to a pub next week, you can't just turn up in a gang of 30.
no, but
Yeah.
it is the bowls, is the social aspect of bowls. So you would meet in the bar and have a drink and socialise.
Right, but the difference there would be that, you know, we're not just meeting to have a drink
With a friend,
socially.
exactly.
We'd be having a meeting as well.
Remember, it's 8 weeks away.
It's 8 weeks away, so and things may
Change.
get worse. They may get better. We don't know. So perfectly understand the comments, Rosemary, and I agree with you. It all
Well, I'm
depends.
watching them very carefully myself, Ray. That's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, no, I understand it, and it all depends on what the rules are at the time.
Quite.
We're not going to break the rules.
Ray, can I comment, please?
Go ahead.
I think whatever the rules happen to be at the moment, you've got to bear in mind that the rules are being geared slightly away from the health of individuals and more towards the recovery of the economy, which
Yes.
is a very good thing, but it's not a fantastic thing for the individuals. So you've got to bear in mind that we're probably going to be more at risk, in my opinion, than we have been over the last month, 2 months.
I agree, and this is why I'm asking you guys: would you attend? And don't answer me now. But what I would like to do is, if you wouldn't mind, either putting it in the chat or in an email to me, give me an answer one way or the other, and if it's yes, maybe, or definitely no, because there's no point us planning it if you guys are going to turn around and say, well, that's very kind of you, but we ain't coming. So I don't want to do both. I don't want to continue with these Zoom meetings and have face-to-face meetings. So if there's too many of you reluctant, and I'm, you know, no blame here, perfectly understand that. If you guys are reluctant to get together physically, then we'll continue with the Zoom meetings and we'll save ourselves the grief. But equally, if there's enough of you who say, well, actually, as long as we take the right precautions, you know, we're up for it, and as long as the government allow it, we would come, then we could do something. So it's a big if at the moment.
Can I give you some up-to-date figures? Then Andover Hospital has always been COVID-free. Basingstoke was declared free of any cases at all for over a week now. Royal Berks had on Monday 7 COVID-related patients, but they've been free of any new people for over a week now. And in West Berkshire, the last actual death within the area was the 30th of March.
Okay, well, that's all encouraging, but you know, and you know, I don't want to jump the gun here, guys. So, you know, don't get me wrong. We're not saying let's do it at all cost. And I think, Paul, your comments are very valid. It is about getting the economy started, and we've seen with Leicester. My God, we've seen with what's going on in America. So yeah, we don't want to be part of that. Thank you very much. And some of us, no doubt, will have health issues that it's really not worth the risk. And I absolutely respect all of that. So, you know, I'm just taking the temperature of the water here. So let me know one way or the other. And if it's a maybe, that's fine. And we certainly won't go ahead and do it without coming back to you and asking the question again. And we'll probably do that, you know, in August sometime. And we'll see what's going on at the time. Yeah. Everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
The voting for the photographs.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can up more than one vote each, or we just keep it as it is?
Technically, that's a bit more complicated. I'd need to look into that. So what you're saying, if we're going to keep the online, you'd like to go back to the 3 vote thing again?
Well, I would, but I also think the online's better anyway.
Yeah. Yes, the
Well,
online's good.
Because we get a better chance to look at it at leisure rather than 5 minutes before we get flogged a raffle ticket.
Yeah.
I agree, and it's also available to everyone, so people who don't get to go to the meeting don't see it, but when it's online, they do. So
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile.
there's-
It always used to be 1 vote before we switched it to 3 votes a little while ago.
Fine.
Yeah, I've been looking at the votes, and I have to tell you, I've looked at when we were doing 3 votes, and I've looked at the results when we're doing 1 vote, and I don't see it changing the result one jot. But what it does do is really complicate the counting.
Just keep it at 1 vote. I was just asking the question.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you asking, because I'm sure others are probably thinking the same. And again, if you know, if there's a consensus that says we'd rather have the 3 votes, then fine, we'll find a solution. But right now, I don't see that it makes a huge amount of difference to the results.
It does, Ray, because if you had 2 votes, very often I get down to 2 that I want to vote for. And it is a split hair which one I eventually send you, because they're both as nice as one another. I like them both as much. They're both good photos. So it's almost like tossing a penny and saying, shall I send A or shall I send B? And if we could just do 2, that would help.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll look at the technicalities, because the only way, by using the current system, the only way of doing multiple votes would create an awful lot of work for me, which obviously I'm going to try and avoid. If I can find a way of doing it that doesn't do that, then let's give it a go. Yeah.
Final one, please, Ray.
Say again.
Various organisations, U3A and all their various groups, since this started, have done nothing. Lots of clubs have done nothing. And I think you and your committee have done a fantastic job keeping us together. You really
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thanks.
And thank you, Paul. Check's in the post.
Yeah, thanks.
You have a clap for Ray.
Yeah.
Key worker.
Well, I just that I went with a simple solution of using Google Forms. There might be a better solution out there that allows multiple votes. So I'll look at it, and then I'll come back to you guys and then see what you think.
Ray, you can always let Pete do the counting.
Yeah. We take it in turns to do the
I don't
counting.
want to do that.
What about emails, Ray? Could we vote by email?
We could. It still involves counting, and the problem is when you're doing best of 3, you've still got to map it out and then total it up and then harmonise it all. And at the moment,
Spreadsheet.
the human brain or a spreadsheet is the only way. I'd rather the system did it automatically for me. At the moment, I haven't found an automated way of doing it. The way I do it at the moment, I get bar charts, pie charts and everything else, and it says question number 22, 1, and it got this many votes. So it's all laid out for me, and it's quite, there's no jiggery pokery, there's no, ifs, buts or maybes. It's black and white, the way it works. So if I could find a similar system or way of doing it to allow multiple votes, then I'm not against multiple votes. It's purely workload that I'm, and as I say, having compared with some of the past voting records that we've got on file with what we're getting now, I'm not sure it would make an overall difference to the first, second, third place. But we'll see. But if we can do it, we'll do it. And then we'll test it out and then make a decision later down the line. What that does do, though, is if we're going to go do the online voting going forward, we'll probably have to come up with another solution for printing the photos for the hospital displays. So Alan and I have had a chat about that, and we'll probably use an online printing service to do that, so that we can get the photos done. Okay, good. Well, I said I wanted a discussion, and you did give me one, so that's great. And I wanted lots of views. You gave them to me. If you have any more you want to say, by all means, put it in writing and in an email, and we'll take it all into consideration before we make any decisions. And we'll come back to you before we make those decisions, just to make sure everyone's on board with what we're planning. Okay, so I thought, given that we spent so long over these past few weeks looking at Lightroom and Photoshop and doing all the post-production stuff, maybe it would be a good idea to try and look at a bit more creative stuff. And the problem with that for me is that takes me outside my comfort zone, because I'm very happy in the technical world. Thank you very much. I'm quite happy explaining how Lightroom works. Thank you very much. Doing the creative stuff it takes me out of my comfort zone. So what I did was I did a little bit of online research and came up with a few ideas, and they're just ideas that you might want to think about when you're out and about, or even if you're locked in. Just to have a play with, to see whether anything, takes your fancy, and give you some stimulation, as it were, on the creative side rather than the technical. So I've got a few ideas. I was just going to run through them. By all means, chat and interrupt me if you've got any thoughts, or if you've done any of these. By all means, interject and let me know. Or let everyone know what you've been up to. So the first one I found, which is dead easy, is if you put a little bit of torn plastic around the lens, it creates fuzzy edges around your picture. Now, in years gone by, I know some of you would have done this. I know I did. You get a clear glass filter and a bit of Vaseline, and you'd smear the Vaseline around the outside of the glass to get the same kind of effect. This is a whole lot better than trying cleaning Vaseline off of a filter afterwards. So, get a little bit of plastic, as you can see in the photo here, and just loosely arrange it or tape it to your lens in any way you fancy, and just experiment to see what effects you get. You might find you like the end result. And you don't necessarily have to use it only for portraits, as you see here. You could use it in some still life or macro photography. You could use it possibly even landscape, although can't quite see why you'd want fuzzy edges on a landscape, unless it was a real misty scene, maybe.
A Christmas card.
Christmas card, yes. Yes, a snowy scene Christmas card.
I can take pictures like that without any paper.
You're black and white.
Yeah, the challenge is getting it in focus, not getting it out of focus. It is funny though, isn't it? You know, we spend all this money on this equipment and so much science and research goes into the equipment to get these fantastically perfect images. And then we go and put bits of torn plastic in front to muck up the picture. This one is quite interesting, is getting a bit of lens or some kind of bit of glass and just holding it up to the camera while you're shooting. Just to see what happens, and you can get all sorts of effects with that, and you could hold a lens and shoot through the lens, like Tony's picture of the flowers last for the project. He used the water droplet as a lens and shot through the water droplet to get the image through the water. Similarly, you can use bits of glass and other techniques for that, or mirrors. You could arrange mirrors. If you want to get a kaleidoscope effect, you could arrange 3 mirrors in a triangle and shoot through the middle of them down the lens, and create a kaleidoscope effect. So 3 small mirrors and a bit of sellotape, you could create, you know, quite an interesting effect just for fun. It's not something you're going to use every day, but it might, you know, just get you going, interested in something. The other thing is using focus deliberately to create bokeh. A lot of people use this expression bokeh, and I don't know that everyone always understands what it means. It relates to the effect that the lens creates when points of light are out of focus. And what that means is, as you see here, you've got points of light. When they're out of focus, what shapes do you get? And that is largely dictated by the lens and the aperture of the lens. Do you get a shape of the aperture in the image? Do you get ovals? Do you get colors? This is all dictated by the lens and the aperture you're using on the lens. So actually deliberately making the picture out of focus can create some interesting effects.
Chris does that all the time without doing bokeh.
Big pardon?
Years of practice, mate.
So Chris, do you have a problem with focus?
No, it's just my eyes aren't very good.
Do you use autofocus, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a rumour that Paul started.
And black and white.
This is another thing, and these are my pictures. I actually did this, but it did pop up in the searching that I was doing as something to play with. You might recognise the girl from the picture I was using last week to do the cutout of the hair. I did a photo shoot with her in a studio, and I used the left-hand picture is using a projector like we use at the club to project images onto a screen. It was one of those projectors, and I just had some random shapes and pictures displaying on the projector, and I just shone those at the model and shot through that. Interestingly, if you look close at the picture, you'll see that the imagery is quite pixelated, and that's because the resolution of the projector was quite low, and therefore you get a pixelated effect. So you can either use that creatively, or you get a more expensive projector and eliminate the problem. The middle one and the right hand one, I had a laser, and it's a laser that you use at sort of in a disco, in a nightclub, and it throws patterns across the walls and ceilings, and I use that to throw patterns onto the model. So this is you know, a laser light projector doing something similar. But you know, you can do all sorts of things like this to create interesting effects when you're shooting.
Ray, does
Yeah.
autofocus work in those conditions?
No, you're really into manual focus there. Yeah, because you've got no real, I mean, maybe on the left-hand two pictures, you might be able to get an autofocus on the eye if you're lucky. But it's difficult, you're right. So manual focus is best. But then, yeah, the good thing with manual focus in a studio setting, if you've got good light, although here you haven't got very good light, is if your aperture is high enough, you've got a bit of depth of field. So even if the model moves slightly, chances are you're still in focus. But you have to be careful of that. But yeah, manual focus is best. And like you, Chris, you know, my eyesight ain't the best it is. So I always struggle to be sure that I'm in focus. I know some of you have played with this, but you can actually zoom your lens while the shutter's open. If you select a slower shutter speed, best if you're tripod mounted, best if the model doesn't move, because here you've got a long shutter speed, but the eyes are still pin sharp. So the model has been very good and been very still. But then you're zooming the lens to get this blurred effect, and that can be quite good. It's quite good also if you do that with lights. So I've shot quite a few parties at night outdoors, and you fire the flash. You have a slow shutter speed with a flash, and what happens is the flash fires very quickly and gives you a frozen image of the person because it fired quickly. But then while the shutter is open, and we're talking maybe a second shutter speed, you zoom or you rotate the camera. And what happens is you've got a nice sharp image of the person because the flash got a nice sharp image. But then the lights behind the person, fairy lights or whatever lights are going on, try this at Christmas with your Christmas lights. You can actually create light trails in the background. So you've got a nice pin sharp picture in the foreground with colored light trails in the background. So flash, slow shutter speed, and experiment with that. So that's something you might want to play with. And as I say, I've done it at Christmas, and when you've got lots of colored lights and things around the house, it can be quite effective. So those were all in-camera things. So here's a couple now that are in post-production. Now, as you can see, my painting skills aren't very good. But I know that there's some of you out there who are budding artists and who could use the painting tools that are available in Photoshop or another bit of software altogether to paint onto a photograph.
If you had a Wacom tablet.
If you've got a Wacom tablet, it's a lot easier, of course, than using a mouse. But I know, but if you're using an iPad, for example, you can get Photoshop on the iPad or other tools on the iPad, and you can draw with your fingers and get some very...
You can't get the pressures though. The Wacom gives you all the different pressures.
True, yeah, yeah. But there are things you can do, and as you can see, my drawing skills are pretty appalling.
I love the lips.
I was thinking that. Yeah, I thought you would love the lips.
Darling.
But here's someone who knows what they're doing, right? And I'm sure there's people out there like yourselves who can do something like this. The pictures are fairly low resolution, so they're not their best, but you get the idea. You could, if you have these kind of skills, you could make some very interesting photographs or images. What do you call them? They're not paintings, they're not photos.
Images.
Images, yeah.
Graphics.
Graphics, yeah. So you could create something, really powerful and impactful if you have those skills. And I don't, even with a Wacom. Here's one that we saw our last speaker talk about, Robert. He showed us a picture where he'd superimposed, but he was doing it in camera. To do it in camera is very clever. I have huge admiration for him if he can do that. I can't, but I can do it in Photoshop. So what this theme is saying is take two pictures, but there's some kind of relationship between the two pictures. So here you've got a lady with her partner, and here you've got a dad with his baby. But to get two pictures that are maybe shot at the same time, maybe not, but are related in some way, and combine them. By the way, the lighting on that dad and baby shot, absolutely stunning. Is backlighting to get that effect. So I thought it might be a good idea if I showed you how to do that. So it wouldn't be a good session if I didn't do a Photoshop demo, would it? So then I get back in my comfort zone. So if I show you one that I did earlier in good, hang on, why can't I see that? Okay, let's stop that. It should be there, it should be there. There it is, okay. So, here's one I did earlier. This is my son and my daughter, taken some years ago. And if you look on the right-hand side down here in the layers, you'll see how it was done. Don't worry too much about these layers for the moment, but this layer here is the picture of my daughter, and I've put a mask on it. So if I turn everything else off, you'll see what's going on here. If I disable the mask, you'll see that it was a cropped picture like that. So I put a mask on to cut her out of that picture. Similarly with my son, it was a picture taken in the garden, and I put a mask on it to get rid of all the background. Put those two together, that's good. Put a background on it, so we've got a nice solid color fill as a background, a sort of a gray background. So we've covered these techniques quite a lot over the last few weeks. So I did two pictures, masked them, put them together, and put a background on. What these layers are doing, we've got levels, we've got brightness, and we've got hue and saturation. These are adjustment layers, but the little arrow here tells you that I've applied those only to this picture underneath. These adjustments are not changing the picture of my son. And to prove that, if I now turn them on, you'll see that they're not changing him, but they are changing her. And the reason for that is that her original picture was, there's a hue and color difference between the two. And I wanted to try and match that as closely as I could. So I did a bit of levels, I did a bit of brightness, and I did a bit of hue saturation just to get it a bit more closer to that. I mean, it's not a bang up professional job, but you know, it's a way of doing it to get it reasonably close. So you know, if you've not done this before, it looks complicated, but hopefully over the last few weeks, we've talked about some of these techniques, masking, adding adjustment layers and putting in solid color layers. So you can get this kind of thing going fairly quickly if you want to. And, you know, like family pictures are an obvious target where you can put, if you combine it with some of the photo restoration we did a few weeks ago, you can combine great Auntie Doris with the latest granddaughter and do those kind of combinations that the family would probably be very appreciative of. So to get something like this picture here, obviously would take a bit of time, and you'll notice that there's a transparency there. So you would use the blending transparency of the layers to get that kind of effect going on, which I didn't do with the other one because I didn't need to. But it's all done in layers. It's all done with masks and adjustment layers. So, you know, have a go, have a play. And you can do this in Photoshop Elements. You can do it in Photoshop, of course, as well as some of the other products that are out there. They'll all do something rather similar. Interestingly, I downloaded a painting program because it was a freebie with the tablet I've just got. And it was using layers, and the layers worked in exactly the same way as Photoshop and Photoshop Elements. So the skills are very transferable. Once you can crack this whole layers thing, the skills are very transferable to other software products.
I did one of my granddaughter floating while she was eating a lasagna.
Excellent. Well, I mean, if you know you're going to do this, you could shoot it accordingly. So, for example, this one with the dad and the baby, I don't know that they were both shot at the same time. I think that was done in post-production. I don't know, but I think to get the dad and the baby like that so perfectly in camera would be a 1 in a million shot, personally.
Difficult.
Very difficult. And also the lighting, because the lighting is coming from behind over here, and this guy would cast a shadow on the baby. So I think it was likely shot as 2 separate shots with the same lighting setup, but then combined in Photoshop. And of course in Photoshop you can get this alignment of all of how you want it. You can move it all around, whereas trying to shoot that in a studio with a baby with an attention span of about 3 seconds is probably not going to be achievable.
I mean, the light on his face wouldn't, if you got the light on him, it wouldn't be the same on the baby.
Yeah.
Because of his face is in the way of the baby, like, you know?
Exactly. So I think using post-production, so if you're going to shoot, if you've got that in your head, when you shoot the pictures, think about that and maybe shoot them with a plain background so that you can do the cutouts and the masking more easily. Although as you saw last week with this new subject tool in Photoshop, even a complex background may or may not be a problem. But if you can, the more you can do when you shoot it, the better, of course.
Yeah, I did another one with my granddaughter looking in a mirror. And when she was looking in the mirror, she was a total mess. But in the mirror itself, she was perfect. It's marvelous what you can do like that.
Yeah.
We could all do that.
Yeah, I do that every time I look in the mirror, period. Especially since lockdown. But yeah, and also this is kind of linked to the whole green screen thing. If you want to shoot against the green screen, then you can do that. But actually, I'm moving away from green screen now, because the problem I have with green screen is that it casts, no matter what I do, it casts a green hue on the subject, and trying to get rid of that is a nightmare. And now, as we saw last week with the new subject selection tool, the algorithms are getting so good, having a non-green screen background isn't necessarily a problem anymore. So I'm now beginning to steer away from shooting green screen stuff and just doing cutouts like you saw with my son and my daughter. Okay, so
Finishing time.
say what?
So Tony's got his decorating finished from last week.
I don't know, has he?
Yeah, look.
Oh, look at that. Good job, Tony.
Good job on that.
Yeah. Oh, you've been a busy
Very
boy.
busy.
Thanks, Ron. You even put a set of stairs in.
The other way.
You photoshopped it all.
I've got to do another one next week.
Mansion.
Grand designs.
Okay, so next week we've got a guest speaker, and he's going to take us on a digital adventure, apparently. So that'd be interesting. He does curiosities and unusual things. So we'll find out what he's got in store for us. And then on the 15th, my daughter-in-law. Yes, it's nepotism at its best. My daughter-in-law is an amateur. She's went on a food photography course, started shooting a few things that she was cooking at home, and now she's getting commissions with companies. So I thought you might want to hear about that because it's a bit of a journey, and she's not got huge experience, hasn't been doing it donkey's years. She's absolutely on the ground floor, and if any of you were interested in food photography or just thinking about maybe trying to start a little bit of a photography business, she's a bit of a social media expert. That's her day job, and that's how she promoted herself. So I think that would be interesting as well.
Yeah.
Final one, Ray, if I may, a quick plug for Paul Roberts. One of the things he told us about tips of in camera was when you're out, every time you go to a hotel, pick up the shower cap. Because when wet, the shower cap protects your camera. Thank you, Paul. It's worked for me.
That's a good tip. Yeah, I like
Very
it.
good tip. Thank you,
Yeah,
Paul.
yeah, good one, Paul.
Ray, Ray, I missed the last two meetings. Did I miss the Paul's challenge? What do we call it?
The photo editing challenge.
Yeah, have I missed the results of that? I haven't seen anything.
There's a gallery online. So
Oh,
if
yeah,
you
okay.
if you go into the galleries under trips and activities and events,
Okay, thanks.
you'll see it in there. And you saw the recording from last week went up, and the project vote, I refreshed that with all the photographers' names now. So that's all caught up and up to date. And the next project vote will be steps, and the dates are on the screen, so you know what to expect. Good. Well, I've come to the end of what I was going to talk about, so let me stop that. Anyone got anything else they want to share or contribute?
Well, we're going to mention, ask if anybody fancied doing a demonstration of some sort. Little 10-minute.
Yeah, I mean, in the spirit of the Petra Kutcher kind of thing, does anyone, if anyone has a hankering to talk about something they've been doing either in lockdown or before or whatever, and you fancy talking about it in the way that you've seen Angela and a few others talk about things, then just let us know and we'll be happy to let you do that. Okay.
Tony could talk about all his gold medals.
I haven't got any gold medals.
All the golds you keep winning.
And silvers.
Well, Shaina knocked you off the top spot. It was close, I have to say, but she did pick you at the post fair and square.
I want to know, Lee.
Good. All right, guys. Well, look, thanks for joining, and enjoy yourselves for the coming week. And we've got our guest speaker next week, so we probably won't be recording that session. I imagine that he will not want the session recorded. So if you want to see it, you'll have to join us on the Zoom call. So we'll see you next week.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bye, Ray.
Bye.
Thanks, Ray.
Bye, Ray.
Bye. Bye.